What's going on, everybody? Happy Tuesday. I forgot what day it was for a second. How's everybody doing? Let me know if there's any problem with the audio or anything. I appreciate it. Okay, let me just make sure I have everything set up. Okay, looking good. So, last Friday was my birthday. I think I mentioned it on Instagram and stuff. But anyway, on Friday, I went to. It's also I already mentioned this, but it's also the birthday of my boyfriend. But I went to go buy a present for him on Friday. Wait till the last second. He was working, and we were gonna meet later on for dinner. So I was walking back, and I always pass this tattoo studio, and in the past, because I'm kind of a beginner tattoo artist still. I have about 3.5 years of tattooing, but just a few, and I kind of learned on my own. But what I had been doing at certain points, especially before the situation that started in 2020, when everything shut down, I would go to different studios and just ask what the situation was. And most of the places here, they have you rent a chair in the studio. So you bring your own clients in and you have a space. They supply some of the materials that you need. And yeah, you're just renting it there. You're not really a part of like a studio family. Really, it's just you come in when you need to, you leave, and you have to give a certain percentage of each tattoo that you do, or you can pay per month. But every time that I've had that type of opportunity, I didn't really have the money to do that. So anyway, I don't know what made me do this on Friday, but I thought I'm just gonna go and see what's up. So I went in, and it was this older gentleman, bald, tattoos everywhere, in his 50s maybe. I think in his 50s. And he was just alone there. And I just said hi, I introduced myself. I said, hi, I'm a beginner tattooer. You know, I'm just trying to figure out what to do. Just looking at different options. And after we were talking in Spanish, and he's like, do you want to just talk in English? And he sounded like he knew English very well. And it turns out he's lived in the United States for like 40 years. Most of his life was in the States, and he came back here to live. And he's pretty well known in the tattooing world. And oh, there goes Aslan. Did you see him jump up? Anyway, started talking, and he told me, I don't usually do this, but I like the way that you're talking. I like, you know, your attitude and everything, and it seems like you're interested, and I would love to, well, he didn't say love, but he said we can maybe see if a possible apprenticeship could happen. And I wasn't really looking for an apprenticeship. Obviously, it was something that I thought about, but I don't know. I thought I don't have the time. It'd take forever. It's like a 2-year, 3-year process where you go and you work with someone, and it's really slow. Like usually you start cleaning and setting up stations and making appointments, and you start on the ground level and you draw at the same time, and then, you know, within a few months then you can start practicing. Then a few months later, I mean, it's a very slow process. But he said, come back and bring your art, because I don't want to see, because I showed him some of my tattoos that I've done, and he said, you know, yeah, you need work, and that's something that I can give you, but a lot of it will be untraining some of the things that I learned on my own. I don't know how much, well, I mean, we'll see what happens. But so yesterday I went back to the studio with some of my drawings and pictures of my paintings that I've done, and he looked through them and he's like, all right, you know what you're doing. And he said, all right, so if you want to give me a year and a half at least of your life, I can show you everything I know, and you will have the technique to go off and do really awesome tattoos and make a name for yourself and all of that. So obviously there was a lot of discussion because I'm an adult and I have to survive. So, you know, I was asking him, you know, what all the logistics would be. But it turns out everything seems to be pretty good. And it's also, I do have to put money down because, and I understand this, I've been in similar situations where people say, oh yeah, of course I'm committed, of course I'll do it. And then in the end, they bail at the end. So he said, if you put money down, that'll show me that you're really committed, and it kind of puts some skin in the game. And it also helps him because if he's receiving money, it's like I have my part to do as well. he's a very like the stereotypical kind of tattoo artist, like very like rough looking, but he uh he spoke very well, and we'll see what happens. So now I'm just trying to get the money together, and then I'll start that. I'm kind of nervous because it's a big commitment. But I also thought I don't have any other options right now. Like it's not like I have 2 or 3 options and then I can weigh out the pros and the cons of each of those options. It's just nothing, maybe some classes of English, teaching English, or something stable. And it's 5 days a week, and I go from 1 p.m. to 9 p.m. and I'm just there working with him. And then after a month, he said I would have the technique and the technique to start doing simple tattoos, and then little by little build up. And he does a lot of different types of tattoos, which is really cool. He's not just like, I do this type or I do that type. And so he can teach me a bunch of things. And he does more realistic style tattoos, which is something that I'd be interested in. So we'll see what happens. But that means that I'll have to figure out what to do with YouTube and doing streams and all of that, because I'll have Sunday off and then another day of the week off. And I still have to teach classes, so it'll be interesting to figure out what to do about that. But we'll cross that bridge when we get there. So, a few years ago, before everything went down in the whole world, I don't know if you saw the advertisement from Gillette. It's called The Best Men Can Be, Gillette, short film. I thought it was a commercial, but I guess it's some sort of advertisement, of course. Anyway, so I was going through I always do this. I see videos and they bring up an idea, and then I go down a rabbit hole looking at different videos trying to figure out different ideas. And one thing that pops up now and then, I make posts about it on my on Instagram, or I make videos about it, even the idea of masculinity. Because, well, let's take a step back. Having been inside a religious structure, things were pretty straightforward, at least with the big ideas, like your purpose in life, the direction, your goal, the steps to reach that goal. Obviously, when you look at an individual, those will be variant, but the big picture items, they are sure, they're stable. And going and then seeing the world now outside of that type of structure, all of those big picture ideas, there's no answer for them outside of religion. So, for example, even the idea of God is the creator and he is your end, and you should love him, know him, love him, and serve him. That's very basic in religion. But then you go outside, and it's like, okay, there's still, you see in people this movement to want to see more in the world, more than the world. There's the purpose, even in their own lives. what is my purpose? Like, I know that it seems like people, the way that they behave, they only live in the moment, or that's the main priority. But everyone is still moving towards some sort of, what's the next step? What's the next step? And I don't know. I see now in the world, and even like looking at different streamers on YouTube or Twitch who are atheists or agnostic, but who are definitely anti-religion, and they're kind of giving the more secular view of life. They don't really have answers for that. I think everyone will say, even religious people will say, happiness is the end goal of our life, to be happy. I think I'm back. I think something happened to the stream. Anyway, I don't know what happened. But everyone wants to be happy, but religion gives you the answer to how you get there. How do you be happy? What is real happiness? And then out here in the world, it's like, well, okay, we want to be happy, but what is that? What is happiness? What is it? Everyone has their own answer, but you see how people live, and it's like, is that really happy? Are you really happy? Are you going towards happiness? Like something more stable? I don't know. Just a thought. But seeing that kind of perspective between the religion and the world, I guess you could say, it's almost like, this is just taking it in a specific direction, kind of the topic that I wanted to cover for today. You see nowadays there's this hatred of masculinity, of traditional ideas on masculinity, and they call them toxic. So they say that's bad, just like how the atheists and the secularists say have a hatred towards religion, so to speak. But then they don't answer, they don't give a solution, they don't give something, they don't supply another answer. So men now and boys are told, don't do this, don't be like this. But then how are they supposed to be? The only thing that's consistent that I see is boys should be more sensitive, should express their feelings more, should be more open. That's the only consistent line that I've seen in everything. But is that what is that? What is masculinity? What is femininity? It's interesting because I think now people have more of an idea of what femininity than masculinity. Like they I think when you say, what is masculinity? Well, I'll just ask whoever's here if you want to answer something. Feel free to share your thoughts. What is masculinity? I think a lot of people instinctually think of the toxic masculine traits, like the more traditional masculinity. But what is masculinity now? It can't be something anti-toxic masculinity. But what is that? Like, what does that mean? And seeing all of the, I don't know if you can hear the truck in the background, but sorry. Seeing that I mean, just when you look at the, I'm gonna look it up real quick. I'm gonna go back to this screen. I wanted to get this information before, but I forgot. Let's see. The incidence of ending your life is vastly higher among males than females among all age groups in most of the world. I can't say that word here on YouTube. They'll flag me. Let's see. I'm trying to find the exact number, but they said 2/3 higher. Let's see. It's the highest in middle-aged white men. Interesting. In 2019, men ended their life almost 4 times more than women. White males accounted for almost 70% of that action of terminating your life in 2019. There's a problem. Just looking at that, and there's a lot of videos on YouTube. I think what started me down this rabbit hole is that there's a lot of drama right now in the manosphere, because there's this when you, like I was saying, when you don't have a clear idea of what something is, you'll see all different extremes happen. Because if you're in this ambiguous state and you don't associate with femininity, and you're like, okay, that's not me, I'm not that way, I'm like this, but then people are saying all of this is toxic, like for example, being competitive, they're saying that that's toxic. It's toxic to be competitive in men. I mean, I think they would say in women it's okay. It doesn't really make sense to me. Maybe the whole conception of being competitive is wrong, period. Which, I mean, can you see any possible downsides to that? I mean, I don't think watching sports would be fun. I don't think businesses would thrive. We would come out with new, I don't know, like advancements in medicine, or grants are given by, there's like this competitive element to that, of being the first to do this, the first to do that. Like, think of with the poke from this pandemic. Like, you have a bunch of businesses that are trying to be the first one to get it out there, because there's I mean, there's a lot of problems with that. I don't want to get into that, but anyway, so you see people who come out trying to figure out who they are. A lot of men and boys. And you have the people who try to push like ultra, like machismo, they say here, like I'm a man, just very uber alpha, just they have to be dripping with masculinity, and that's their solution to this void that has been created in society. And then you have the people who are more, maybe naturally, maybe by their formation, they're more passive, and they associate more with feminine traits, and they fit into that. Some of them do it politically. to fit into a movement, to make a point. I think maybe there's some malicious characters out there. There's always malicious characters. But I think a lot of them, a lot of men and boys just want to figure out what they should do, how to act. I mean, you can be a parent that says, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. Like, don't be like this, don't follow this. Don't be competitive. Don't, I don't know. There's a list that we'll hopefully see in one of these videos, but don't be all of this. Be more sensitive. Be more this. Be more. But it's not there. There's really no idea of how to be. It's almost like, people say, be yourself. Just be yourself. Just be who you are. Find yourself, be yourself, whatever. Great. But what if being yourself, what if you do have a competitive like nature? I mean, if you've ever been to my house, my family, whenever we have a board game or a card game or any sort of game or of anything like that, we are all very competitive. Have you ever played a game with someone who's not competitive? It is the most boring, useless experience. It's better not to do anything. It's better not to play any games. If someone's just there and it's like they don't want to be there, it's like, it's a game. Does that mean that's a bad thing? All right, so we'll watch a little bit of this video. I'm just going to take it as it comes. I kind of have an order of the information that seems kind of logical, but we'll see where it goes. Let me know if the sound isn't good. I think it'll be fine.
Bullying. The Me Too movement against sexual harassment. Masculinity.
Is this the best a man can get?
So obviously Gillette is they're kind of like the man, the real man. Like that was their whole shtick. Like, real men do this, yeah. So they're kind of they have to, in order to stay safe in the political environment, they kind of have to take a few steps backwards and make sure that they're explicit in their adherence to certain ideas. I mean, they started off, there was like Me Too movement, toxic masculinity, like all these different phrases that spark some sort of allegiance.
Is it? We can't hide from it.
Sexual harassment is taking over.
It's been going on.
That's a great place to pause. So yeah, so it's just, they're giving a summary of all of those things.
Far too long. We can't laugh it off.
Who's the daddy? What
All right. I just want to make sure that I'm pausing. But I did hear something happening downstairs. I'm gonna go check on it very quickly. Excuse me. I'll leave you with some music. I'm back. It's all good. I think something just fell. Sometimes the cat goes a little crazy. So let's keep going. I'm so interested to learn about. I think this is a good summary of the ideas. You know, we're looking into the past. We're looking at how men were before, and we're seeing all the negative things, and we're exaggerating it. Actually, all of the people in here who represent those evil, horrible masculine traits that we're trying to abolished from the world. They're all very like caricatures. They're not like real people. They're like cartoons almost, the characters. I don't know. Let me know what you think. Hi to new people. We're talking about masculinity, if you didn't know.
Actually, I think she's trying to say.
Making the same old excuses.
Okay. Wait a second. So we're in the board meeting, and
What I actually think she's trying to say.
Making the same old excuses.
Boys will be boys. Boys will be boys. Boys will be boys.
But some
you know what I mean? I'll leave my comments till after.
something finally changed.
Allegations regarding sexual assault and sexual harassment.
Of course, they have Anna, what's her face from the Young Turks. I don't know who the heck any of the other people are.
And there will be no going back. Because we believe in the best in men.
Men need to hold other men accountable.
Smile, sweetie.
So one thing that this will come up many times, hopefully, during this little talk, no, during this live stream, is the fact that there's this they don't make it explicit, but it's implied by how they speak, how they give certain instances of all of these bad things, right? All these bad traits that men have. You know, here's why does it say no data? Okay, now it's excellent connection. I'm so confused. Anyway, they give all of these specific examples of how men are bad, but behind that is this idea of like we have to make this profound change because of these particular instances. So like you can't look at these like if someone has a boss who harasses someone, a woman or something like that, we can't, in this way of presentation, we can't really say that person is a bad person, is a bad man. We can't say that. We have to say that person represents all men. He's bad because the whole idea of masculinity is bad. So it's almost like the individual doesn't really, I know it won't come to, no one will actually say this explicitly, that it's like, oh, I'm not saying all men are evil. I'm not saying all men, I'm talking about the ideas. Like that's what they say. But how they talk about it, how it's presented, it's like we have to change. Men start to have to do this. Men, it's very general. Like I know, I was a kid. I was taught how to be a man from my mom and my dad. They both gave me different perspectives, but they formed me to be who I am today. And I knew I had friends. I had classmates, or I had, friends on the soccer team, and I saw how they behaved. And I didn't think, and they were, brats. They were brats. I thought they're not going to probably grow up to be, it's going to be a difficult life for them because they weren't given the same formation that I was given. Right? So I can't say, oh, the idea of giving formation is bad because that person turned out bad. The idea of educating children by parents is bad because that person is bad. or maybe I saw more than just one person. Maybe I saw 10 kids on the team and they were all idiots or something. It's like that. You can make a distinction. People who say these types of things about toxic masculinity and it's like, I would love to ask them, can you in your family point to a man that you respect, a man who you see as a masculine man, but who isn't toxic? I know I can. I had in my past a lot of examples of a man in my life. But the thing is, I think this is another thing that I hope we get into later if we have time, because there's not really any real dangers. Like, we're not in a war, there's nobody at the gates, you know, trying to destroy the wall in order to get in and pillage there's no threat. So it's almost like we're trying to see a threat where there really isn't one. Does that make sense? I don't know. It's an idea. Let's keep going.
Come on.
To say the right thing. To act.
So that was a real man. But guess what? I did that when I was growing up. Like this
right thing.
like this person. So men have to be accountable to other men.
Wow, sweetie. Come on.
So a guy says, "Hey, sweetie," and the other one's like, "Come on, stop." I was that person. I was like, "Come on, guys." But it doesn't mean that the guy who was like, "Hey, sweetie," like, in my mind, that guy wasn't educated. Like, he didn't respect women. Like, it wasn't that he's more in line with traditional ideas about manliness, and I thought I was better formed because of in that aspect, I respected women, and I didn't, well, there's other reasons for that too, but I didn't really see them as objects like I saw my friends. But even now, I don't see men as objects. Like, I'm not the type of person who like looks around and like salivating. That's not my MO.
To say the right thing. To act the right way.
Not cool.
Who does that? Who's like, "Oh," and then follows a creep, not a man, a creep who happens to be a man. But that's not how we're trained. That's not the traditional way of thinking. It's like, if you want to have a real conversation about maybe some bad societal norms placed on men, let's have it. But let's not create this caricature that doesn't exist. And if it exists, then they're fringe members of the masculine community, or I don't know how to say it.
Some already are. In ways big and small.
I am strong.
But some
What parent wouldn't stop their kids, their boys, from fighting? Do you think that's like the man thing? It's like, yeah, go get him, get him. Like, I would say that's a bad father, like a bad particular example, not because this father or these fathers act that way. That means there must be something wrong systemically.
is not enough.
It's not how we treat each other, okay? Okay.
Because the boys watching today will be the men of tomorrow.
Thank you, Gillette. Now we all know how men should be. If you watch that from start to finish, we have bad examples of um of toxic masculinity, right? So we see some examples of the bad masculine traits. And then they said we have to be accountable for each other. So when we see people expressing these traits, then we have to call them out. But they didn't give us an example of what a real man is. They don't have an answer. I mean, it looks good on paper. It's a beautiful, sentimental type of expose on bad men, but they don't know what to say. They didn't get that far in their idea of toxic masculinity. It's so easy to point the bad things out. It's really easy to do that. But to give an formation, education on how to make a man, a mask, like to. This is one thing. Every guy, every man, just like woman, has many elements, complex elements to them. Some are more masculine than others. Women have masculine traits, but that's not. Some women have the toxic masculine traits, but we don't talk about that because it's a woman, you know. But we're all complex. So every child, every particular instance of a man is going to need a different way of education in order to create a whole person. But what I mean by whole is like a well formed person. And to do that, you have to look at the person and see their traits. And we'll look at that. I mean, I don't think if there's anybody out there, any parent who is teaching their child to harass their female coworker, you're a bad parent. But we already knew that, didn't we? Well, let's keep going. I'm going to turn on the next video. Right. I don't know about this video yet. We'll see where it goes. I might just stop it and go to the next one. But it's from a channel called Real Men, Real Style. There's so many of these channels and publications, websites of teaching men how to be men. They're so popular. And it's funny. I think a lot of men realize that biology still exists and the females in their life are more attracted to a masculine man than one that is being promoted in Hollywood, like the male hero, the male counterpart of relationships are like best friends. Your best friend, your confidant. And I just thought of something. I wonder if that's why men, especially, I know there's a lot of women too, I'm not negating that, but men especially are so. Oh wait, that was the white supremacist sign. Oops. Not whatever. I don't have to explain myself. But if that's why men nowadays, even adults, in my age, 30s, 40s, they are obsessed with Marvel, with superhero movies and stories, because it's like they're able to vicariously like live through these characters that are superhuman, that are like gods almost, and that represent these very masculine like qualities, and they save people, they sacrifice their life to protect the weak mortals, like all of these things. And it's funny, I haven't heard a lot. I have seen a few videos, the titles, I haven't watched them, but it's that could be promoting toxic ideas. I haven't really seen, if people were being honest and following the logic of their ideas, then they would condemn Marvel, and then all of the superheroes would end up not being superheroes. Interesting. I don't know. What do you think? So, real men, real style. The rise of weak men. Are men less masculine? Oh, let's see.
And in my definition, it does seem that, yeah, there's just not as many of what I perceive to be masculine men around as there used to be. But
so that's his idea. There's not as many now as there used to be.
for a guy that's maybe 75, 65, he may actually disagree with me. He may agree. A lot of this depends on your background. What is your viewpoint? Where are you coming from? And now,
that's true. That's honest. He's saying that his kid may have a different perspective than he does, or someone who's 70 from another generation, what their perception is. They might agree, disagree.
Finally, at this point, I'm getting to the meat of the video. How do you define masculinity? So I went to Reddit and I found a few definitions.
Always go to Reddit if you want the definition of something. It's like always go to Wikipedia if you want a non-biased assessment of something.
Fishy Taquitos says, by definition, anything a man does is manly. I'm sorry.
Okay, that's stupid.
Fishy Taquitos, but I think that is a stupid, okay, maybe that's
yeah, that's stupid.
Harsh word. Lazy response. Seriously, anything a man does is manly, so I can trip and fall. That's manly. I can go out.
All right, come on.
Of manly is not anything a man does. Another definition proposed by BSM Productions was
a masculine man is supposed to be the guy that goes and sweeps the woman off her feet by taking control and being a fearless leader. What about that? Do you agree with that assessment?
Masculine man is supposed to be the guy that goes and sweeps the woman off her feet by taking control and being a fearless leader. He's supposed to make the first move. Now that's...
It is interesting to see, even culturally. I'd love to see a study done where you take different cultures all over the world and you see the common threads of more masculine or more feminine traits in the people, what they promote in their society. And I think in those type of universal studies, maybe there can be some grounding in something that's beyond just a social norm, if that makes sense. It can be something more biological. That's scary. People don't want to say that now. But
a definition maybe some of you guys are going to want to agree with, but personally, I don't like it. I don't think a guy has to make the first move, has to sweep a woman off his feet, has to be a fearless leader. These are maybe in some people's minds nice traits to have, but I don't think they define you as being masculine. Now, for my definition, I'm going to go back to about 350 BC.
Okay, he's going back really far. 350 BC.
At that time, there was a guy named Aristotle. You may have heard of him. He defined masculinity.
Man, do I know Aristotle? I studied so much Aristotle in the seminary.
masculinity as living a life of eudaimonia. What does that mean? It's basically translated as living a life of human flourishing, of
Okay, masculinity is living a life of human flourishing. Does anybody know what that means?
excellence, of basically being
Excellence.
all that you can be. I really like that definition. In fact,
It seems like with a lot of these things, I feel like they apply, like especially in a general sense. Like if they say masculinity is, I don't know, well, what he just said, a life of excellence, and then giving qualities of that. And I think, well, that can be applied to a woman too. So, I don't know.
I created a coin that, in a sense, is a compass. It's got 4 directions, 4 areas in my life that I want to work on. I want to constantly improve. Those areas,
All right, I just want more information.
a lot of my thinking on this over at The Art of Manliness, and he talks about how being masculine is not the opposite of being feminine. It's actually the opposite of being a child, of being childlike. When you
Okay, that's interesting. That is interesting because people put masculinity and femininity at odds. Like the more masculine you are, the less feminine you are. That is very interesting, but he's saying that masculinity is the opposite of that is childishness, childlikeness, being a child, but being a boy, which does root it in biology. So this is Aristotle, by the way. We're looking at opinions and seeing what happens.
become a man, you leave the ways of being a child. A child is dependent on others, is selfish, all these things that we define as being childish. Well, you leave that when you become a man. And a woman can have all the same virtues, pretty much, that a man has. And in fact, to be, womanhood, that's a whole separate thing. But what we're talking about here is not a competition of just simply a man. I mean, there is a competition. It's you're competing against yourself. And the man.
Wow. That is something that I do agree with. People don't want to look at themselves. They don't want to look inside themselves. They look outside of themselves for whatever, for the reason that they're suffering, the reason that they have, like, let's say a guy is later on in life and he realizes that he's so toxic. The masculinity that he was taught is very toxic. And instead of looking at himself internally and seeing his part in that behavior, like a guy who's aggressive towards a woman, physically aggressive, it's like, well, I'm that way because society taught me to be that way. It's society's fault. Society told me to be this type of man. Really? It's society's fault that you just were aggressive to that lady? Wow. Because I must have grown up in a totally different society as you. I wasn't taught that. That wasn't the norm. That wasn't the norm. But it was the norm. That's what they're saying. Aggression. Physical aggression. Which isn't always a bad thing. Oh, it's not always a bad thing to be aggressive. Be aggressive. Be aggressive. I bet they don't say that anymore. Do they? I don't know. Do they? Leave a comment down below if they still chant that at games. War? I mean, if we go way back to the Neanderthals, aggression was something that was for your survival.
can you be better than him? Can you take a small step in the right direction to become the man you know yourself to be? Now, gents, you know I love to motivate you, and I got some coins I'd love to see.
Okay, well, that wasn't that informative, but I mean, it's just, you take little pieces here and there and see what happens. Yeah, and anybody who's watching this afterwards, leave a comment down below. It might even be interesting that somebody leaves a comment about what they thought, and then maybe after watching some videos and thinking about it, they come to a different conclusion, or I don't know. Maybe just say, oh, this is what I thought it was. This was my idea, and then this is kind of what I think now. Or these are the misconceptions I had, or something like that. It'd be interesting. What is masculinity? This is a very the audio is really bad on this video, but I'm only going to watch the first little bit of it. All right, let me know if there's a problem with the audio. I changed the settings to my mic. Veronica, hello. Happy to see you too.
What is masculinity?
Okay, can't hear it. We're going to put the subtitles on. Sorry. And there's this like static sound as well. It's not coming from me. It's from this video that has 280,000 views.
People seem to know it when they see it. They sense it. They react to it. They evaluate it. But if you asked most men to define masculinity...
Is this guy masculine to you? He's definitely showing some... I mean, even the way he's holding himself right now. But like big muscles, tattoos, tough, eyebrows furrowed. Furrowed? Is it furrowed?
You get a lot of confused and conflicting answers.
That's true. So if you ask men what it is to be a man, you'll get a lot of answers that are confused and conflicting. That's right. That's what we're talking about. That's what I've been thinking about.
In many cases, you'll get a lecture about morality, about what a real man should do, about what he shouldn't do, about what he should wear, how he should behave.
And yeah, that was my upbringing. There was a lot of that. Men, my parents were very I don't want to say rebellious in this sense, but they weren't as oppressive as kind of the norm in the church. Kind of the ideal for a man, or a boy actually, at our church was jeans that were just straight cut, no flourishes, no tears, very simple, very practical. If it had the little hoop for the hammer that you're going to use later, that's even better. A plaid button-down shirt, tucked in all the way, a belt or suspenders. Some men wore hats because this was a very traditional environment. So hats were very in fashion for a lot of people, but not for a fashion sense, not in that perspective. And New Balance sneakers. That was like the day-to-day ideal manly outfit. Someone who, it's very practical, very efficient. The jeans are very strong, button-down shirt, and shoes, tennis shoes that were simple, not fashionable. So somebody who was focusing on the practicality aspect of clothing. For example, I don't know, the idea just came into my head.
The answers and the rules, they change from social class to social class and from culture to culture. So much so, in fact, that many people believe masculinity doesn't mean anything at all, that it's just
Yeah, I can understand that. Masculinity doesn't mean anything at all. That's kind of the trend that we see in everything. In everything. Everything's very fluid. And I know from personal experience, when you don't have any grounding on reality, on like something you can rest your feet upon, that you can feel, that you can look at, but when everything's like, yeah, just go with the flow, just be this, just be yourself, just, it doesn't matter, it's very insecure. It's very insecure. I've noticed that. Like why would you go to do any sort of psychological work to really come face to face with who you are and what you think, what your experiences were, your whole makeup? Like there's something concrete there. But nowadays, tying something down is wrong, especially when it comes to gender or like masculinity, femininity, anything like that. Tying it down in any way is seen as detrimental and mentally harming to people. Like having a boy go to his mom and say, oh, I really want to win today. It's like that's coming from the child. That's how he really feels, right? And the mom freaked out. My boy wants to win. He's competitive. That's toxic. That's bad. No, you can't feel that way. But he does. He does feel that way. Because it's something natural? Maybe.
just a social construct. And to support their point, they tend to study and write about different groups of men and their different ideas about masculinity. When I wrote The Way of Men,
Okay.
I wanted to look at those different groups of men and their different
He
ideas
does get to
about
a point.
masculinity. And I wanted to see what those ideas actually had in common. And
He wrote a book, this guy, Jack Donovan. I just want to make sure I say his name. I'll show his page. But he says something interesting soon. I think I think it might be another minute away. But he says something interesting that's going to take me in another direction, a tangent.
I wanted to figure out why those common values have always been so important to men. If you asked most men throughout history and around the world for a list of qualities that they'd associate with masculinity, the vast majority of them would agree that a man should be strong.
Okay, so now we're getting into, like I was just saying, like, are there common traits that we can see universally throughout the world, throughout history, that can be applied to men? Doesn't matter the culture, the society, anything like that. But it's a common perception, and there's certain qualities. I don't know if this is true. This is this guy's book, but I find listening to different people's opinions interesting. I don't like to live in an echo chamber.
Courageous, competent, and honorable. Those are what I call the 4 tactical virtues: strength, courage, mastery, and honor.
Strength, courage, mastery, honor. So those aren't the toxic masculine traits. Strength, maybe you could interpret that to mean aggressive. Courage. I mean, I haven't really heard about that, but maybe they would twist that into, say, a man thinking that he needs to, protect, that he needs to go out of his way. Maybe something like that. Mastery. So having a craft, having knowledge, and having that control over that knowledge. I mean, I haven't heard anyone criticize that. Honor. I can see people criticizing that. Maybe. Honor. Like thinking that they have to do great feats to have the respect of other men, other people from the society, maybe. But I mean, we still, you can have all of those ideas, but then we have systems in place like the military. Strength is necessary, not unless you're, I mean, even if you're cooking, you have to cook for a ton of people. You got to have arm strength, but you know what I mean. Courage, come on. Of course, courage. Mastery, yeah. Honor. I mean, just looking at the military, I can see that. But then people will say, "Oh, but the military is a bad system." Well, it's a necessary one. I don't know if anyone has read history recently, but it's something that is essential. If it's a just war or not, that's another discussion. But the existence of a military is pretty much a given for a society. I'm trying to think of other fields, like a doctor. I'm just thinking of men right now. Obviously, whatever is said about masculinity, women can obviously have masculine traits, and women can actually be more masculine than a particular man. That doesn't matter. We're talking about masculinity, strength, courage, mastery, honor with doctors, with. So the question is, do you think it's more men that are striving, that are using these he says virtues, so ways of acting. Do you think that it's more in line with men in general? Of course, we're speaking in general. I'm sure anyone can say, "Oh, my cousin, she's, a tom girl or tomboy, whatever." But in general, like, these are more in line with the men in our lives, or with the women, the feminine qualities. That would be interesting to see, like, what these people, like this guy, he probably doesn't have an opinion about femininity, but I don't know. But just to see, like, what would be the virtues from his perspective of a woman.
They are the qualities that men would want from each other, that they would need from each other, that they would demand from each other in a survival scenario.
Survival scenario. So this is where it's getting interesting. It's very just from my experiences in life, it seems like, guys talk like this. Girls don't really talk like this. Guys do. This is like a guy way of talking. Like, if you and I were about to die, I would do this, and I would pick you up and carry you to, like, this is how guys talk normally.
Just imagine that the building you're in right now is surrounded by zombies.
Okay, so this, when I saw this, imagine the building you're in right now, imagine it, everyone out there, is surrounded by zombies. This is another, like, I don't know.
Aren't those the qualities you'd want in the men who are on your side? It's pretty straightforward. Like, pick.
So when I when I heard that about the zombies, guess what I started thinking about? This is my train of thought. You watch one video and it kind of like inspires you and you think, I wonder what if there's any video on this. I wonder what the other side says about this. I wonder, and you kind of like hop back and forth and see different things, and you kind of just follow this train into the abyss of whatever. So I started thinking of The Walking Dead. I thought of this before. I'd love to do a video one day about The Walking Dead because I watched that when it first came out, and I was still very much Catholic, very much in line with religion and going to the seminary and all of that. And I had my own perspective then and comparing it to the world because I see it as like a metaphor in a lot of ways, that show. And I think that's why it was really popular. But anyway, I was thinking of that. And I thought, in that type of scenario, in that type of life or death scenario, there's certain qualities that ensure survival. And those type of qualities, people in the show, the men in the show, those were men. They were men. You had to be. And it even inspired some of the men to be more masculine during the show. Just the situation. Even if it was maybe against their nature. But I remember watching the show and seeing, there are differences amongst the men in the show, but there's still this congruency. There's this line of qualities that I can see in all the men. And obviously the main characters and the main villains, those are the most evidently different, but they still share certain qualities. But you see the line within them. But then all the secondary characters, I would forget, especially with the men, I would forget who they were because they all acted the same. They all did the same thing. Life is very simple in that type of situation. And that's it. But everyone had to take on these masculine traits in order to survive. Aggression, if someone was out there trying to teach people not to be toxic, the men not to be toxic, you can't be aggressive. You can't, if they, if boys were raised during that time to be anti-toxic masculinity, they wouldn't survive. They wouldn't survive. Like if someone was like, oh, just sit down and, just make sure that you're, you come here and you share your feelings and, don't go practice your gun, your shooting or your knife, fighting, I don't know, with your friend. Don't in any way do that. It's better that you come here with me and you sit down and you make sure that I want to make sure you're feeling okay, that you're telling, which is a good thing. It's good to be in tune with your emotions. I mean, I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, but in that type of scenario, it's better to instill those traits for survival. Right? I'm gonna. So, in the characters in The Walking Dead, this won't be a very long tangent, but in the men, well, there's before I get there, there's women characters in the show that start off very like frail and weak, which in my mind isn't a good representation of femininity. That's kind of like the caricature that we're told. But they're just very weak people. There's one woman in particular who was in a very abusive relationship, and she was just very like delicate, and she didn't have a backbone because she had been hit, well, physically, but she had been hit over and over with all of these traumatic events, and she just was a broken person. And in the situation, the zombie situation, she had to become more aggressive, more masculine, I guess you could say. But who she was before wasn't really feminine or masculine. She was like a broken person. But it's interesting to see that transition. And then in the end, like all the kids, the women, the men, they're all out there like, stabbing zombies in their head. And there's, as things progress and there's more of a stable societal structure within the show, you see more of the normal distinctions between people start to come. There's more of a relaxed atmosphere where people are able to develop themselves, and they're able to have families and focus on the schooling and that, all the different things. People are able to find their place, but in the heat of the moment, everyone just becomes zombie killers. Very masculine. But anyway, you see in the main male characters and the bad guys, these characters as well, obviously. But the difference, the cause that makes the viewer say, this person is the good guy, this person is the bad guy, is not something as easy as this person is aggressive and this person isn't. Because they're both aggressive. But what's the difference? One is evidently good, one of them is evidently bad within the framework of the story. It's because of who they are as a person. It's that this person can control, has a certain dominance over those aggressive movements, and this person doesn't. This person uses it to take advantage of people, to dominate people. So it's almost like you can say the good guy dominates himself in a certain sense. He's the master of himself. Maybe that's what mastery means from that video. This video. Mastery, self-mastery. He's able to control in a certain sense these natural movements that are coming from himself. The other one has mastery over people. He uses these aggressive or whatever, competitive, all these things. He uses it to dominate people. He attacks people. He kills people. So in my mind, after all of these thoughts, the good guy isn't perfect. He's not, God. He's not the perfect representation of a man. But I look at this character and I think, that's more of the type of person I want to be than the other person. Maria, I think when someone's survival is on the line, their actions are amoral. Wait a second. Oh no. I have to report this. Stupid spammer. Okay. I think when someone's survival is on the line, their actions Oh no, come on. Sorry, guys. Okay. Again, I think when someone's survival is on the line, their actions are amoral, neither good or bad, because they are trying to stay alive and away from harm. I think in a case of absolute necessity like that, there is a distinction. Like, if you don't have time to think, if you don't have time to process and weigh the options, then it's almost like you really didn't have a choice in it. You really didn't have the opportunity to choose. You just acted, right? But for what I'm saying is, yes, it's a survival type situation, but in the come on, people. These spammers. But in this situation, yes, there's a threat, but the threat is the zombies, and it's not like, there's a zombie on top of me. It's just like a constant threat. Like, there's really no time to, put your feet up and relax. Like, you have to be aware. Your life is on the line if you take a break for a second. It's more that type of situation. But I do understand what you're saying. But it has to be I think it has to be in very particular type circumstances, because like it has to be something really traumatic where it's like we black out, or like we don't have time to even process what we're doing. It's very particular circumstances. But I think in most situations there's a choice that we have. I don't know. I mean, it depends on a lot of things, and some things make us more culpable, I guess, for our actions than other situations, and it depends on, the situation, our education, there's a lot of variation on that. It's not as black and white. But anyway, I look at the good guy in Walking Dead. I really love that show. Maybe I should make a video about it, but I think that's the type of man I want to be. And when I say that, it's not I want to be him. I don't want to be that character, because he's flawed. He has problems. He's different. He's different because his manifestation of masculinity is different than mine. But I'm looking at him as a manifestation of certain qualities that I want to have within myself. There's a connection because I'm a man, he's a man. So I see this character who has every excuse, I guess you could say, like what you were saying, Maria. Like, he has every excuse to kind of maybe go a little out of control, because it's like, well, don't blame me, blame the situation. He could say that, and sometimes he does. He does get too angry and goes too far and suffers the consequences. And that's kind of the beauty of watching these types of shows, reading literature, whatever, is that we're able to see people behaving in a certain way and receiving the consequences of that. And we can internalize it and think, maybe I shouldn't do this, or maybe I should do this because of the consequences of those actions. But anyway, just interesting. Something as it's seemingly insignificant, like The Walking Dead, in my mind, can teach something very simple like that. Aggression isn't the problem. To be aggressive, be aggressive. No, sorry. To be aggressive isn't the issue. It depends on your circumstance. For these people, these characters, they're in a very particular circumstance. they have the zombies, they have this, they have bad people that are attacking them, they have, their level of aggression is going to be different than mine. But that doesn't mean that there can't be a practical application for that natural movement that comes out. It's just seeing somebody in a particular circumstance controlling the level of their aggression. Because there's other characters in the show that go too far. And there's some even that don't go far enough. And that's interesting too. They're not aggressive enough. They don't push themselves to go far enough to be able to survive. There's a certain amount. Your action depends on who you are, obviously. Maybe those people who weren't enough aggressive, maybe that was just naturally who they were, but they died. So that's the consequence of that. Maybe it's evolution. But what was I saying? The circumstances called for, I forgot where I was going with it, but the situations of that situation called for a certain response, a certain behavior. And obviously in today's world where, I don't have zombies at my door, maybe you guys do, but who's threatening to come inside? But I have been in situations where I had to be aggressive. Every time I say that, I want to be aggressive. Be. No, I had to be. The situation where the guy came at me with a knife. It was controlled. I didn't go and go like crazy because maybe I could have been stabbed. I was able to moderate. Oh, what a great word. Moderate. I was able to moderate my response to not have a bad consequence, but I had to stand firm and equal what was I had to correspond with the situation that I was in, being Francis, being a man. There are situations where we have to express these natural movements that we have. The problem is that some people were never trained how to moderate their actions, how to know the proper channels to release these feelings or to interpret those into something beneficial. Because you don't want the cop or somebody like that, the security guard at your work or at your apartment complex that you're paying to be the security guy. You don't want him to not show any aggression if someone comes up. You don't want him to be like, oh, okay, yeah, go ahead. I don't have conflict with people. This is how a real man should act. No, go ahead. No, can you stop, please? Please stop. Don't come in. Like, is that... It seems like there's a proper proportion of aggression. I'm talking about aggression a lot just because that's the quality of toxic masculinity that kind of sat with me today when I was thinking about all this stuff. But there's other ones we can talk about. But there's that proportion that is necessary. Obviously, we're not Neanderthals, like I said before. It's not like we gotta go hunt for our food. So the manifestation of the masculine or feminine, by the way, anything that I say here can be easily applied to feminine, but these natural qualities about us they're going to have a different way of expressing themselves. But that doesn't mean if there's bad people out there, that doesn't mean that any of these things are bad. Because someone is too aggressive and beats someone up to the point of killing them, or is abusive to their wife, they're too aggressive and they're abusive to their wife, does not mean that being aggressive is wrong. Does that make sense? I found it very, like, oh, when I thought of The Walking Dead, because the guy was talking about zombies outside, and then I thought, there's zombies outside, The Walking Dead. And then I just started, oh, the men in Walking Dead, they're like really masculine. And it just brought down this whole rabbit hole of ideas. Just some ideas that I had. Because trying to figure out life and how to act. I mean, I'm a man. I'm not like, ugh! Yeah, I'm not like this guy. Next, I'm just gonna start. I'm not like him, but guess what? It's okay, because the way that I present my masculinity is different than how he does, and it's okay. I have a level of aggression, not in the good or bad, not in the moral sense, but in that movement that comes out. I have that tendency too, but I know I have my own level, and I'm able to moderate it. Aggression is appropriate in The Walking Dead. Well, that type of aggression, I can't really see, not unless there's a zombie apocalypse, I can't really see how we're gonna live like them in that show. That's really a very particular circumstance. But just some ideas. I'm going to go to the bathroom, and I'll come back. So don't go anywhere. I'm back. Oh, some people left. I'm sorry. Sorry, I'm not like a... Oh, you're back. I saw 3 people, now there's 5. That's okay. I've seen some people, and they sometimes get off the live stream if there's not enough people, and I don't care. I mean, if there's one person here, this is a private show just for you. And I appreciate you being here, because I know some people watch it afterwards. But anyway, that's what I was thinking. And there's one last video. It's from a guy. psychologist, Dr. Sean T. Smith. He has a YouTube channel. The American Psychological Association has sent a discouraging message to young men. So this is 2019. This is my contrasting message of encouragement. Young men should cultivate their masculinity, not relinquish it. Okay, this is this guy's opinion. Let's see what he has to say.
Thoughts for you younger guys today about these recent messages that have come out.
What about the not so younger guys? Does he have some thoughts for me?
From the American Psychological Association about masculinity. And if you're not familiar with what I'm talking about, there's two pieces to this story. There was, number one, a set of clinical guidelines that the APA put out for clinicians to use in working with men and boys. And
I love hearing these like official mandate type of things or guidances, because it really does show like the direction of, because psychology is something so intimate with people. It's like going inside your head almost. And some psychologists by the way that they ask the questions or the way that they open up the ideas and stuff. It's not just like you're talking to a wall that bounces the ideas back at you, but everyone comes from their own perspective, their own formation, their own education. Every psychologist has their own perspective on how things should be, how they think. You can't help. We're all human. Just because you're a psychologist and you were taught to not be biased doesn't mean you're not going to be biased. Maybe that's what you're striving towards in the way that you interact with clients, but I think everyone has their, we're human. We have our day job. Our life outside of the job.
And then there was an introductory story that came out in their magazine just talking about these guidelines. And while they stopped short of calling masculinity...
What's the name of this? Can you guys see the painting behind him with the dogs playing poker? Diminished culpability. Diminished culpability. What do you mean by that? What do you mean by that, Sam? It probably is connected with what I said, but I can't make the connection right now.
A mental disorder, they didn't stop short by much. The message is very clear that if you possess any kind of traditionally masculine traits, that you're a danger to yourself and others. And in the introductory article, there was this line that has gotten a lot of play that I think sums up pretty nicely where the APA is coming from.
The main thrust of the subsequent research is that traditional masculinity, so right there, it's like, what do you mean? Traditional masculinity marked by stoicism, competitiveness, dominance, and aggression is, on the whole, harmful. That seems very clear, that position. And this is the APA, the American Psychological Association. So this is like the official association. Men socialized in this way are less likely to engage in healthy behaviors. Okay.
Traditional masculinity, marked by stoicism, competitiveness, dominance, and aggression, is on the whole harmful. Now,
so he goes through and talks about each of those qualities. And I think it's interesting what he says. Let me know what you think.
On both the guidelines and the introductory article, they refer to these things as traits. And that's kind of sloppy language, but it's fair. You can think of traits as clusters of behavior that help you move through the world. And it's fair to say that these traits are more commonly expressed in men than women.
I agree with that. I think I mean, we talk about toxic masculinity, and these are the traits that are pinpointed as toxic and not toxic femininity. So, they're connecting it with men, even though they try to separate the gender expression, and sex. But sometimes ideas don't follow through in every field right away. We might see a change in the language later on, but so be it.
That there are other traits that are more commonly expressed in women than in men. So all that's fine. But to say that traits on the whole are harmful is just about the stupidest thing I've heard all year. But it's only
I like this. I like people who are just upfront with how they believe. They don't try to skirt around the edges. I'm sorry that this guy is being very toxic and aggressive. He said stupid. This is a stupid idea.
only January, so the APA still has time to outdo itself. Let's look at a trait, for example, like
sarcasm.
compassion. I'm sure the APA would say that something like compassion is a good trait to have, but it's good to have if it's done correctly. If you do compassion,
Yeah, even the good actions, even if they gave a list of these are the good actions of what a man should be, there's still the application of those good qualities in particular circumstances. Certain situations arise that require a certain way of behaving than others, if that makes sense. Like there has to be a part of the formation of anybody, man or woman, is learning having situational awareness, understanding that like, for example, something stupid like I'm at home so I can wear my pajamas and wear not wear shoes and not really do my hair, or I don't even have to take a shower. Come on, I'm at home. It doesn't. But then I'm going out. Some level of situational awareness will tell me that being like that, having that type of behavior, like lounging around the house, whatever it is, this change in my environment requires a certain set of behaviors that are connected with me, but I have to adjust myself to those situations. Like with my boyfriend, I'm going to have a certain list of behaviors that are not going to be the same when I'm with my parents. So that's kind of, I think, what he's saying. Even the good things have a certain, the good traits, the good qualities of how a person should be, a man should be. It depends on the situation. It depends on the circumstance.
Incorrectly, you put yourself at risk for being taken advantage of, and you also risk weakening other people by creating resentment and entitlement in them. It's a very common problem. And so compassion may be a wonderful trait to possess, but it has to be done correctly. You can apply that same analysis to all four of these traits that the APA has called harmful.
Okay, so now he's going to go through the traits, the four traits.
Start with stoicism. Stoicism is nothing more than the ability to contain your emotions and act in a productive manner. And this,
right. So they don't express it like that. This is the toxic version is suppressing your emotions, not containing your emotions, suppressing them so that they get bottled up and then they explode with rage and unhinged aggression. That does happen in some people. But what he's saying is stoicism is the containment, the moderation of feelings, containment, putting them in your hands, so to speak, and seeing them. Like none of that is bad. And then containing them in order to continue on. If I'm at work, for example, and I just found out, like let's say I am I'm a cop. Okay? I'm a cop. And I find out that my cat died and I'm on the job. I'm just about to go in to a live shooter situation or something like that. And I just found out my cat died, and I loved this cat so much. This cat was given to me by my mom, who passed away, and now the cat had such a connection with me and really helped me get through that. There's all this emotional baggage, and I feel horrible. It is destroying me on the inside. But I have a job to do. I have to go in to this situation clear-headed and do my job, because that's what's required of me at this moment. There's no, oh, can I go home? I just feel really bad. No. Does that make sense? That's what that in my mind and in my education, it wasn't just don't think of your emotions, just keep them down. Don't just and then explosion, of course. Because you don't understand how to deal with your emotions. But okay. Sorry, I just thought I'd add that.
This is something that anyone who's over the age of 2 should be striving to develop and refine. Now, if you've been in the workforce for any period of time, you've probably worked with...
And I was even thinking, sorry for interrupting. What about a woman giving birth, for example? This idea of stoicism. What if the woman was just like, no, stop. Like, I can't. Like, push. Oh, no. It hurts too bad. Like, I've seen a lot of women, not giving birth, but in life in general, where it's like, I don't care if I'm hurting. I don't care what's happening. I have to do my job. I have to take care of my children. I have to do this. Like the mama bear type of situation, the lioness. But like in that moment, it's required to not just sit and understand and talk about the emotion, but in this moment, I can't focus on this because I have to continue on. And then I'll come to a breather where then we can talk about it. Stoicism has its own system of philosophy. It's a healthy way to cope with hardship. Yeah, well, I mean, just from what he's saying, I don't know if it's I know that there's a whole philosophical system, and Stoicism in general is not it's not like a stable philosophy. Like it can't I don't know. I have to, before I say anything, I have to I have to investigate it. But I remember studying it, and it was very clear that it wasn't sustainable. It wasn't very human, actually. But in this, he says stoicism, and he gives his definition of the idea, and I understand that, what he's saying.
The guy who bitches and complains about every little thing.
He said a bad word.
Bring a lot of solutions to the table. That's a guy who hasn't mastered stoicism yet. He hasn't learned how to contain his emotions and turn it into actions. And he's a detriment to himself, and he's a detriment to the team. On the other extreme is the guy who...
Yeah, that's true. You know, sometimes it's like situational awareness again. Like sometimes the situation requires the containment. I really like that way of saying it. The containment of any sort of emotional response for the moment, and then later on we can process it. Maybe the processing part is something that is difficult, hasn't been well formed in people, especially boys. Like I said, it's not the idea, it's not the traits that's the problem. It's how someone, the person who has the trait, that's where the issue is. It's that this person wasn't given the tools in order to use the traits, use the elements of their personality to be a good person, I guess, to make it blunt.
Who has a problem that he should bring to the team, but he won't do it because he's proud or he thinks he's going to be in trouble or whatever his reasoning. And I know because I used to be that guy. He's a
This is good. Sorry, I have ice in my mouth.
in trouble or whatever his reasoning. And I know because I used to be that
Okay,
guy.
we just heard that.
He should bring to the team.
Wait. Go back.
On the other extreme is the guy who has a problem that he should bring to the team, but he won't do it because he's proud or he thinks he's going to be in trouble.
This is important. Now he's given the flip side. I like the way he's presenting this. He's saying the person who it's detrimental, the person who is not able to contain their feelings to get the job done, to function, that can be detrimental for the person or for the people around them. And I'm not even talking about life or death situations. I mean, just think of any sort of situation. Or you have the other extreme where it's like, no, you need to bring this thought, this feeling, this thing to the table, and you don't. It seems like it's the education, it's the situational awareness, it's understanding how to know how to act in a particular circumstance.
Or whatever his reasoning. And I know because I used to be that guy. He's a detriment to the team for a different reason, because he's not bringing an alertness to the team that he should be bringing. And the same thing can apply to marriages and just interpersonal relationships. There's a line that a man has to find between suppressing his emotions and expressing real problems that need to be solved.
It's like an art. It's like an art. You have to learn the technique in order to know how to. Can you hear? It's the person that comes around with the corn. Oh gosh. Sorry. All day there's something. And once there's nobody going around, the dogs are barking.
Let's look at the next one, competitiveness. This is nothing more than the drive to outperform somebody else or outperform yourself. This is not, on the whole, harmful. Now,
that's an interesting thing. The idea of outperforming yourself. Like, last time I made it to this level. This time I want to make it to the next level. Like, trying to become better at something.
Now, everyone who participated in writing these guidelines at the APA probably has a nice smartphone and a nice computer, and they drive around in a nice car and live in a nice house. And
I sense sarcasm coming up.
They live in a society that allows them to say whatever stupid thing they want to say. None of these things would exist without people competing with each other. It's the ability.
Oh, that's interesting. Look around you. Look at everything that you have. Everything, all the tools that you have.
To look at yourself and try to outperform the next person and come up with a better idea, a better mousetrap, a better way of doing things. That's what's created this wonderful society that we live in. To call it harmful is stupid. Now, a person could be too competitive to the point.
I don't know what's happening with the chat. Sorry. That was from when you were talking about acting in extreme duress or circumstances. Yeah, I understand now. I understand diminished culpability. Like, you're in a situation where you don't really have time to think. Like, should I or shouldn't I? Well, let me sit down. I'm gonna weigh out the options, the pros. You don't have you don't have time. You just got to do it. That's diminished culpability, right, Sam? Thanks.
Where they're ruining their relationships and they're not succeeding because nobody wants to deal with them, or a person could be not competitive at all to the point where they're just relegated to a minimum wage job for the rest of their life.
That's possible too. Whenever you have these qualities, there's two extremes that you can find in it. Too much, and that's usually where we say toxic, but just as dangerous possibly is the other way. Maybe not as violent, but you can still cause harm. Like in a situation that requires you to be very aggressive, like to protect someone that's with you, for example. You go out and you're really aggressive. That situation requires you to be really aggressive, right? But imagine in that situation if you weren't aggressive at all, and you were harmed and the other person were harmed. Something like that. Both extremes.
But competitiveness done correctly is a huge asset to any man. Dominance is the next one they say is.
This is a good summary, I think, of kind of the main points of toxic masculinity. I think.
On the whole, harmful. Guess what? We live in a hierarchical.
I'm gonna subscribe to this guy. I like him.
Species. Meaning that if you're not going to vie for dominance, then somebody else is going to be dominant over you. And sometimes you make those choices that you don't want to be the one in charge. But you can only make those decisions if you develop and you refine your sense of dominance. Dominant.
Okay. I need to listen to that again. Sorry.
Done correctly is a huge asset to any man. Dominance is the next one they say is on the whole harmful. Guess what? We live in a hierarchical species.
Okay. Does everyone agree with that? We live in a hierarchical species. A society requires I would say yes, just by looking at an infant. In our species, infants can't just pick up or get up, start walking, and start finding their food right away, finding their way. They require the parents or someone more developed to take care of them, who's able to protect them, able to feed them. Even that is a hierarchical type of situation. All of these ideas require you have to assent to all the different parts in order to get the full idea. So if there's question of, are we in a hierarchical type of species, then you're not going to agree with any of it. You're not going to agree with the conclusion. That happens. You have to see each part and try to understand each of the part of the argument. I definitely know bad hierarchical systems, but I don't think as in the idea of it, like the idea of authority, for me isn't the issue. Having someone in charge of something over another person or people, that isn't an issue, and in fact necessary in certain circumstances. The problem is the person with authority. Sometimes they're bad. Does that mean authority as a whole is bad because you have some I've plenty of words I can call them, but a bad person in charge?
Meaning that if you're not going to vie for dominance, then somebody else is going to be dominant over you. And sometimes you make those choices that you don't want to be the one in charge, but you can only make those decisions if you develop and you refine your sense of dominance.
If you are not able to be in the position, be in a position up the rings, up the ladder, I guess. If you're not capable of doing that, then you can't choose to do that. If you don't have the qualities to be the manager of a job, then that's never going to be a possibility for you. You're never going to be able to choose if you want to or not. You're always going to be the one below. That makes sense.
Dominance done incorrectly is abusive, and nobody wants to be around that person. Or it's just
tyrannical. It's tyrannical.
Absolutely submissive. And again, this is a hard person to deal with.
It is. It's difficult on both extremes, to have someone who is just the boss that's on your tail, that's just wants to control everything that you're doing and doesn't give you the freedom to actually do a good job, but they're on your back the whole time. Or the person who's just flopping around, like they just don't it doesn't seem like they have a backbone at all, and you're like, you're the guy in charge, you're the boss, so and then it's like the whole system is shaky, and you don't have the security of having someone who's seeing the bigger picture above you. Like, you not only have to do your job, but you have to make sure that it fits into the system. Like, there's not just I don't know if that makes sense. I'm just going to stop talking.
Dominance done correctly is called leadership. And if you go to a bookstore, you're going to find shelves of books on leadership, which might as well have dominance in the title, because that's really the theme, is how to be dominant in a way that serves yourself and serves other people. And finally, let's look at aggression. Aggression is, again,
okay, so this is the one we were talking about. Let's see what he says.
Not a destructive or harmful trait. It's just drive. It's the drive to solve a problem.
Aggression can also mean violence or hostility. I'm not talking about that. Violence bad. Okay, let's hear what he said again.
Other people. And finally, let's look at aggression. Aggression is, again, not a destructive or harmful trait. It's just drive. It's
drive. I mean, we'll hear what he says to see if we agree with him or not. I say we. I'm talking about myself. You can agree with anything or everything or nothing of what I say. That's fine. Or what he says. But I have to continue on to know exactly what he means by drive. Because when I think aggression, I think it's easier for me to think of the bad, overly aggressive. Like, it's hard for me to think of the middle idea. It's easier for me to think of the excess of that. I think that's common for everyone to think like that. Aggression, like, automatically is bad for people. They automatically think of the extreme.
It's the drive to solve a problem. It's the drive to defend somebody. It's the drive to create a better condition for yourself or somebody else. Aggression by itself is not a harmful thing. I'd argue that the absence of aggression is actually far more harmful, because without aggression, you don't have the energy that you need to solve problems.
All right. Well, I agree with what he said about drive, those excess and defect. I'm just not sure that that's what I don't know if I see the connection necessarily. Like if drive is the right word. I have to think about it.
The APA clearly wants you men to relinquish these traits. And why do they want you to do that? Well, I don't think it's to help you. I don't think they're acting in your interest. I think it's to help them. And
Oh. So now we're gonna, this wasn't a part of my idea, but the reason why, maybe, a possible reason why this whole idea of toxic masculinity is being put into the front. I think for some people it's like, well, you know, I've come across a lot of assholes in my life that have caused me harm, so obviously I want those people to not exist. Okay, that could be a driving force for attacking these traits, because you don't want people to, especially with violence or any sort of sexual action. I don't want to be specific, but I think everyone here knows what I'm saying.
And the reason I think that is that when I read the guidelines, I come across sentences like this one. When working application. So we had the information, and now it's the application. When working with boys and men, psychologists can address issues of privilege and power related to sexism in a developmentally appropriate way to help them obtain the knowledge, attitudes, and skills to be effective allies and potentially live less restrictive lives. Allies. Allies to what? With boys and men, psychologists can address issues of privilege and power related to sexism in a developmentally appropriate way to help them obtain the knowledge, attitudes, and skills to be effective allies and potentially live less restrictive lives.
I don't really get the potentially live less restrictive lives. Like not restrained by the traditional masculine ideas. Like be more free and be more open to be whatever they want to be? Is that, I don't know. Now
that last phrase, less restrictive lives, I don't know what that means. That's gibberish to
me. He doesn't know either.
But I know what that first part means. It means that they want you to become their allies in the war of ideas. And they want
So they in this circumstance is the APA.
Me to manipulate you into doing it. And a couple of sentences later, they even talk about the fact that if I can persuade you to give up your masculinity.
Indeed, awareness of privilege and the harmful impacts of belief and behaviors that maintain patriarchal power have been shown to reduce sexist attitudes in men and have been linked to participation in social justice activities. Wow, they're being very explicit in this. Wow, okay. You know what I feel? Can I just be real with y'all? Can I just be real with y'all? It seems like because there's bad men, and men when they don't have the tools to harness their strength and their aggressiveness, I guess, when they don't have the tools, the means to do that, they pose more of a threat because of physically they are more dangerous, potentially dangerous than women on a whole. I've seen some women and I would not want to get into a fight with them. So I'm not speaking about that. I'm talking about in general. And I think that's something that's easy to understand. But I think because there's that potential there, it's almost like with this whole idea of destroying toxic masculinity, which happens to destroy innate traits that can be used for good just as much as it can be used for bad. it's almost like in order to prevent a possible evil, we're just going to neuter the men. Does that make sense? Like it's almost like instead of focusing on forming these masculine traits into something that can be beneficial to the person and the people around them and society in general, and making well-formed men with masculine traits, instead of that, it's better to just snip, snip. And if you know what I'm snipping, because then it's like, well, now we don't have to worry about anything. And then the men are like, what do I do? I mean, have you ever, like, you see those videos of the dogs after they, get, is it spayed or neutered? I forget which one is for females and which one's, anyway. They get the snip snip, the dogs, and they're in the cone, and they're just like they've lost their drive to live. I know it's a personification. It's putting, a funny emotion behind the dog. They're more embarrassed to just be in the cone probably. But, it's that idea like, now what do I do? That's how I feel with this whole idea of toxic masculinity. Like, okay, now what? Like, oh, we got rid of the problem, but now the men are like, what am I supposed to do? Be an ally? Like my purpose is to just my existence is for something else like that. Like that's like, where's the personality? Where's the individuality? Where's the dignity of the human? Where's just some thoughts. I don't know if this is exactly what it was meant by the video, but it's just some ideas that I thought of. Because it's easier to just I've seen that too. I've seen videos of, and I think in some ways they say it to cause a rouse in people, which, it's social media, so I don't doubt it. But you see, especially like very progressive feminists talk about men in a way that men are like stepping on dog crap, and it's on their shoe. Like that's the level that they speak to the men in their lives about men. And it's like, what? But it's good because women were in that position before. Really? And even if they were, does that mean that it's okay to flip the script? Is this the reparations? I've never treated a woman like that in my life. So why is masculinity being attacked? Men, because it does end up, like I said before, they try to separate feminine and masculine from the sexes, male, female. They try to separate that, but in practice, they can't help but connect them. Masculine, man. Feminine, woman. Like that's, it's just something that naturally happens with people. They can't help. It's like you really have to retrain the way that you're thinking, but it happens, that natural connection, making that natural connection. But anyway, I think that's all I got. Wow, it was 2 hours. Over 2 hours. So, how are you guys doing? I'd love to hear y'all's opinion. Grew up in North Carolina, so I can say y'all. It's not appropriation, thank you. How y'all doing? Never had the accent though. Well, if anybody wants to see me do a video about The Walking Dead, I could do many videos on The Walking Dead. There's so many elements to it. There's so many different perspectives you can take watching the show, and only the first few seasons really. After that, it kind of I didn't like it as much. I did watch all of it though. But anyway, thanks for coming. Thank you for being here, everybody who's still here. And let me know any thoughts that you have in the comments. Once I finish the stream, you can write the comments, or I think you could do it now if you want. But I appreciate it a lot that you're here. I never thought that I think there's 4 people here now. I would never think like 4 people would want to come, so I appreciate it. And let me know if there's any other videos or any other material that you know of to kind of like help fill out these ideas that I'm having about masculinity. Because I'm always excited to learn different and new perspectives and to see if I can see the logical connection inside of it. So anyway, thank you for coming, and I'll see you